What caused the Big Bang? You did. Big answers to big questions. Every answer to the big questions of existence is contained in just one place, the state that preceded the Big Bang. Since the Big Bang is where science, the study of space, time and matter, begins, the state prior to the Big Bang is by definition not scientific. It's something else. It's the necessary precursor of science, the sine qua non of science, without which science could never exist. Scientists, as quasi-religious fanatics, do not accept that any world can exist prior to science. They ideologically deny the existence of any world that is inherently indescribable by science and immune to the scientific method and the whole scientific shtick. They have no sufficient reason for this denial. It's merely part of their unthinking dogmatism and slavish devotion to their paradigm. Rather than accept that science has a pre-scientific source, scientists are perfectly willing to claim that the scientific universe miraculously appears out of non-existence, for no reason, via no mechanism, by pure random chance. In other words, scientists would rather support the impossible claim that scientific reality magics itself into existence out of nothing at all than concede that science is an application and manifestation of something deeper and more fundamental than science. It's not metaphysics that is the source of physics, it's ontological mathematics. It's definitely not random action in non-existence. In Jungian terms, scientists are sensing types, not thinking types. They are content to reject reason if it contradicts the evidence and experience of their senses. By contrast, going back to Descartes, thinking types are not convinced in the slightest by sensory evidence and experiences. After all, it's a well-known fact, going back to the philosophy of David Hume, that the human senses cannot detect causation. Senses detect sensory events, not their causes, which are inherently undetectable by the senses. If we could observe causes with our senses, there would be no debate about how our world operates. The whole problem of knowledge is that we can't observe what's going on behind the scenes, hence we have to infer, via some means or other, the nature of that which is unobserved and unobservable. Some people approach this problem via mysticism, Eastern religion, some via stories, mythos, some via faith, Abrahamism, some via the philosophy of empiricism and materialism, scientists, some via grand speculations, philosophers, and some via pure reason and logic, mathematicians and rationalist philosophers. David Hume's philosophy offered us two basic choices regarding causation. 1. To deny causation entirely, which is what Hume did. He converted our notions of causation into mere psychological beliefs. Or 2. Accept that a whole universe of causation exists, about which sensory evidence can tell us exactly nothing. This goes against the whole grain of empiricism and more or less implies that empiricism tells us nothing whatsoever about true reality. Thinking people, which is to say people who are not blinded by the propaganda of science, accept the existence of unobservable causation and direct their thoughts at the nature of the all-important causal layer, something which has nothing to do with science. There is no such thing as a scientific experiment that reveals the cause of anything. What science does is observe patterns in nature, then attempts to match those patterns to mathematical equations which can successfully reproduce them. Once an equation exists, it is then used to predict things we have not yet encountered, and, if it does so successfully, we are no doubt suitably impressed and believe that the equation is telling us something about reality. Scientists then attach an interpretation to the mathematical equation, and tell us that their interpretation is right because the equation is right. All the little believers in scientism agree this is wonderful and say, look how brilliant science is. Only a fool would disagree with science. However, stop and think, i.e., do what scientists routinely refuse to do. Take the example of quantum mechanics, one of the two jewels in the scientific crown. The mathematical equations of quantum mechanics, which are incredibly successful, have been interpreted in up to 20 different ways, all implying radically different things about the nature of reality. The different interpretations directly contradict each other, yet no one can tell which is right and which is wrong. None of the interpretations has ever been disproved. Some interpretations are more popular than others, but since when has science operated as a popularity poll? So, we know for a fact that science presents us with interpretations, the truth of which it can never justify via any scientific means. Nietzsche said, "There are no facts, only interpretations." That is devastatingly true of science. Science does not give you facts. It gives you interpretations of observations, which are themselves interpretations constructed by our minds via our senses and specific regions of the brain, and alternative interpretations are always possible, as quantum mechanics demonstrates. The Lorentz transformations that stand at the core of Einstein's special theory of relativity were interpreted in one way by Einstein, and in a drastically different way by several other brilliant physicists. Einstein never disproved the rival interpretation. His view simply became more popular. It's now taught as if it were the unambiguous truth when in fact it remains a contentious interpretation, which has never been proved. Indeed, it's probably true to say that Einstein's interpretation has been proved to be false, but that this has simply been ignored by the scientific community. All so-called evidence cited to support Einstein can equally well be used in favor of the opposite interpretation. Therefore, how good is science if it can't prove its own favorite theories, and can't disprove rivals? You are buying into a belief system, not a truth system. It's staggering that so many amateurs are so credulous about the claims of science. They're just like the gullible religious masses. Next, any mathematical equation that reproduces the patterns of nature in a certain range may be useless outside that range. Science is never able to establish any theory's range of applicability, which means that we can never rely on any theory. We don't know when it will suddenly fail. Newtonian physics is highly effective within a certain range, then falls off a cliff. Einsteinian physics replaces Newtonian physics, but then is completely incompatible with quantum mechanics, which is why no such thing as a theory of quantum gravity exists. The trouble for science is that there are often multiple mathematical equations that can match a certain observed pattern within a particular range, and science is completely unable to identify all of them and choose the one with the broadest range. That's why scientific theories are always changing as the experimental range is expanded. F. Werner said, "How do we know that, if we made a theory which focuses its attention on phenomena we disregard and disregards some of the phenomena now commanding our attention, that we could not build another theory which has little in common with the present one but which, nevertheless, explains just as many phenomena as the present theory?" Nobel laureate Eugene Wigner said, "It has to be admitted that we have no definite evidence that there is no such theory." We could go on and on about the limitations of science. Science is never anything more than a provisional model. It has no connection at all to the incontestable truth. It never reaches the sublime level of mathematical proof. It always remains mired in evidence, which is to say at the level of multiple dubious interpretations. No profound thinker relies on evidence, given that evidence is only good as the interpretation of the evidence, and the quality, accuracy, and certainty of the interpretation is exactly what is at issue. You can't use one interpretation of evidence to rule out all other interpretations, as quantum mechanics demonstrates. Science is not about truth. It's about confidence in models. Science can tell you nothing at all about what reality is. What it does is present you with models that simulate reality in various ways, which can be more or less successful. The trouble with the worshippers of scientism is that they do not understand science at all, and they claim that their provisional, falsifiable models are the truth, or reality itself. They have confused the simulation of reality for reality. Of course, the truth is something which, by definition, cannot be falsified, because then it wouldn't be the truth. Hence, truth is not scientific if you are one of those who believes that science is predicated on a falsification principle, which says that claims must be capable of being falsified in order to qualify as scientific claims. A falsifiable model can never be true. It can only be a model proposed as being useful in simulating reality. It can never be reality itself. The worshippers of scientism keep forgetting that science is a modeling system and never a truth system. Worshippers of scientism keep repeating the fallacy, absence of evidence is evidence of absence. The human senses are themselves just modeling systems. Others creatures have radically different sense organs, and radically different sensory ranges. Thinkers, unlike scientists, are little interested in mere models. They want the actual, absolute, infallible, immutable truth, of exactly the type that Plato sought. They are not interested in human experiences, human interpretations, human models. The sophist Protagoras said, "Man is the measure of all things." This is the authentic basis of science. All scientists are sophists. They despise philosophy, the search for the actual truth rather than the human interpretation of truth designed for human audiences. Science is sophistry. It's a game of models. We thinkers are philosophers, not sophists. We are not persuaded by the human take on the world. We want to transcend that limited, fallible, unreliable viewpoint. We want to view nature from its own perspective, not the human perspective. We want to speak nature's language, not be befuddled by made-up, arbitrary human languages. So, let's return to considering the state that existed before human science, before human language, human beliefs and opinions, before human experiences, human models and human interpretations, and before the human senses. A sophist says we can never escape from our human perspective. A philosopher says we can. Bertrand Russell wrote, "Mathematics takes us still further from what is human, into the region of absolute necessity, to which not only the world, but every possible world, must conform. There is no such thing as a world, any world, where mathematics does not apply. There is no world where the number pi does not exist, where the circumference of a circle is not 2 pi r. Every truth of mathematics is an eternal truth." Some lunatics claim that humans invented mathematics, which is equivalent to claiming that humans invented pi and circles, and that pi and circles do not exist in universes lacking humans. Humans discover mathematics, they don't invent it. It's true that there are human misinterpretations of mathematics, false claims to what mathematics actually is and how it functions and operates, but these errors can be resolved by strict mathematical means. Mathematical fallacies can be tracked down, exposed, and fixed. This is not true of science, since science can never be anything other than a limited modeling system. That's the manner in which it is conducted. Its method relies on observation, which immediately means that anything unobservable, such as something as fundamental to reality as causation, is outside science and is formally non-scientific. Given any event, the claim of what caused the event is not falsifiable, hence is not a scientific matter. The cause is always unobserved and unobservable, and Hume was willing to go further and therefore claim that causes do not actually exist. This is part 1. Look out for part 2.